I told my family I had nothing left, and within a week, they treated me like I no longer existed. I'm Eleanor Brooks, 72 years old, a widow, a mother, and until recently, the person everyone called whenever they needed help. For years, my family saw me as dependable. If someone needed a down payment, I helped. If someone needed tuition money, I helped. If someone needed a place to stay, I made room. I never kept score because I believed family wasn't supposed to work that way. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, I decided to run a test. It wasn't a cruel test. It wasn't even complicated. I simply let my family believe I had lost everything. The story wasn't entirely impossible. A failed investment, market losses, retirement funds wiped out. At my age, people hear stories like that every day. I told Michael, my only son, over coffee. We sat in a diner a few miles from his office. The kind of place where the waitress still called everyone honey. I remember wrapping my hands around a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. Michael listened quietly as I explained that my finances had collapsed. I expected concern, maybe questions. Instead, he stared at the table. "That's unfortunate, Mom," he said. "Unfortunate. Not devastating. Not heartbreaking. Just unfortunate." I smiled and nodded. Then I watched him check his watch twice before the conversation ended. 3 days later, Vanessa called. Usually she spoke with bright enthusiasm whenever she wanted something. That afternoon her voice sounded distant. She asked a few polite questions. Then she quickly ended the call. The following weekend, something happened that made my stomach sink. Every year our family gathered for Sunday dinner. Sometimes at Michael's house, sometimes at mine. It had been a tradition since before Olivia was born. That Sunday, my dining room stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no invitations. Around 6 o'clock, I finally checked social media. There they were. Michael, Vanessa, Olivia, several cousins. Everyone gathered around a long outdoor table covered with food and decorations. They were together less than 20 minutes from my house. I wasn't invited. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was surprised, because I was counting the days. It had only been 1 week since I became the poor old woman nobody needed anymore. The realization settled over me slowly, like snow covering a driveway overnight. Quiet, cold, impossible to ignore. The next morning, I received another confirmation. Vanessa had created a new family group chat. Olivia accidentally mentioned it during a short phone call. "Didn't you see the messages?" she asked innocently. I told her no. There was a pause. Then she changed the subject. That evening I sat alone in my living room. The grandfather clock ticked steadily against the wall. Outside, the sun disappeared behind the trees. Inside, the silence felt heavier than usual. I opened a notebook and wrote down every small change, every ignored message, every canceled plan, every excuse. I wasn't doing it out of anger. I wanted clarity, facts, patterns, truth. Because if my family could abandon me this quickly over money, I needed to know exactly who they were. As I closed the notebook, my phone lit up with a message from Michael. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Then I read the text. "Mom, things are really busy right now. We may not be able to visit for a while." I read it twice. Then I placed the phone face down on the table. For the first time in years, I saw disappointment in my son's eyes when he looked at me. Not because I had failed him, because he believed I no longer had anything to give. The days that followed moved slowly, but the pattern became impossible to miss. I was not being forgotten. I was being removed. There is a difference. Forgotten is accidental. Removed is deliberate. Every morning I woke up at the same time, made my coffee, and sat by the kitchen window overlooking the maple tree in my backyard. For years my phone had started ringing before breakfast. Family members asking questions, sharing updates, looking for advice. Now the screen stayed dark. At first I told myself everyone was busy. Michael had work. Vanessa had her social calendar. Olivia had college classes. Reasonable explanations were easy to find, but the silence kept growing. One afternoon, I stopped by a bakery that Vanessa loved. Every Thanksgiving she asked for their apple pie. I bought one out of habit and considered dropping it off at their house. Then I remembered that I had not been invited to Thanksgiving planning this year. For the first time in decades, nobody had asked what dishes I was bringing. I stood in the parking lot holding that pie box and realized nobody was expecting me. Nobody was saving me a seat. I drove home instead. The pie stayed untouched on my counter for 2 days. Later that week, I sent Michael a simple text message asking how his week was going. 6 hours passed before he replied. His answer contained 7 words. Busy week. Hope you are doing okay. Nothing more. No question. No conversation. No warmth. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then I added another note to my notebook. On Friday evening, I saw photos online from a family dinner at a steakhouse downtown. Michael was there. Vanessa was there. Several relatives were there. Even distant cousins I only saw twice a year had attended. I studied the pictures carefully. Everyone was smiling. Everyone looked comfortable. There was an empty chair at the end of the table. For a moment, I wondered whether it had been meant for me. Then I laughed quietly at myself. Nobody leaves an empty chair for someone they never planned to invite. The most painful moments were not dramatic. They never are. Pain often arrives disguised as ordinary life. A missed call that never comes. A birthday lunch that happens without you. A conversation that continues after you leave the room. Small things. Repeated enough times, they become impossible to ignore. A few days later, Dorothy Miller stopped by unexpectedly. She had been my friend for over 40 years. She walked into my kitchen carrying a bag of groceries and immediately noticed something was wrong. Dorothy had always possessed that ability. Some people listen to words. She listened to silence. We sat together at the table while sunlight filtered through the curtains. I told her only part of the truth. I explained that the family seemed distant lately. Dorothy listened without interrupting. Finally, she set down her coffee cup and looked directly at me. "Eleanor," she said softly, "people show their character when circumstances change." I nodded but said nothing, because deep down I already knew she was right. The test was no longer revealing isolated moments of selfishness. It was revealing something much larger, something I had spent years refusing to see. And with every passing day, the distance between me and my family seemed to grow wider, while the truth became impossible to escape. The moment I realized I had truly been pushed outside the circle came on a Saturday afternoon. Olivia called while I was trimming the rose bushes near my front porch. Her voice sounded cheerful, distracted, the way young people often sound when they are juggling 3 conversations at once. We talked about school, the weather, and a book she was reading. Then she casually mentioned how excited everyone was for her birthday dinner the following weekend. I stopped clipping the roses. "Birthday dinner?" I asked. There was a brief silence. The kind that tells you someone suddenly understands they have said something they were not supposed to say. Olivia hesitated. Then she quietly explained that the family had reserved a private room at a restaurant downtown. Nearly everyone was attending. My hand tightened around the gardening shears. Not because I was angry, because I had not heard a single word about it until that moment. Olivia quickly tried to recover. She told me she assumed I already knew. She assumed someone had invited me. I told her not to worry. My voice sounded calm. Years of practice had taught me how to hide disappointment. After we ended the call, I sat on the porch steps and looked across the neighborhood. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Life continued exactly as it always had. Yet something inside me felt different. I opened my notebook and added another entry. Family birthday dinner. Not invited. That evening I found myself thinking about earlier years. I remembered organizing birthday parties when Michael was young. I remembered spending entire weekends baking cakes, decorating tables, wrapping presents. When Olivia was born, I continued the tradition. Every birthday mattered because family mattered, or at least I thought it did. The following week passed quietly. No invitation arrived. No phone call came. Nobody mentioned the dinner. On the morning of Olivia's birthday, I mailed her a card with a handwritten note and a small gift certificate to her favorite bookstore. By evening, photographs began appearing online. Smiling faces, toasts, decorations. Family gathered together around a long table. I studied each picture carefully. Michael sat beside Vanessa. Several relatives laughed toward the camera. Olivia smiled brightly in the center. There was no sign that anyone had noticed my absence. What hurt most was not Vanessa. I had already begun to understand her priorities. What hurt was Michael. My son had seen the guest list. He had known I was missing, and he had said nothing. That realization stayed with me long after the photographs disappeared from my screen. A few days later, I visited the grocery store and unexpectedly ran into a distant cousin. We exchanged polite greetings near the produce section. During our conversation, she casually asked why I had missed Olivia's celebration. The question caught me off guard. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I smiled and said I had not been able to attend. She nodded, apparently accepting the answer. but I noticed the confusion in her eyes. She believed I had chosen not to come, which meant someone had allowed the family to assume I simply stayed away. As I drove home that afternoon, one thought repeated itself again and again. My own son had become a spectator to my humiliation, and for the first time, I began to wonder whether the distance between us had started long before the test ever began. After that conversation in the grocery store parking lot, I could not stop thinking about the question my cousin had asked. Why did you miss Olivia's birthday celebration? She had assumed I made the choice. That assumption stayed with me because it revealed something important. Nobody was telling the family that I had been excluded. They were allowing people to believe I simply no longer wanted to participate. It was a quiet kind of rewriting, the kind that happened slowly, enough that most people never notice it. A few mornings later, I opened an old cedar chest in my bedroom. Inside were photo albums, greeting cards, and dozens of small reminders from another chapter of my life. I sat beside the window and began turning pages. There was Michael at 8 years old holding a baseball glove almost as large as his arm. There was Michael at 17 wearing his graduation gown. There was Michael standing beside the first car he ever owned. Looking at those photographs felt like looking at evidence from a different lifetime. When my husband passed away years earlier, Michael and I had become even closer. We called each other every week, sometimes every day. We shared holidays. We shared worries. We shared victories. At least that was how I remembered it. But as I continued turning pages, other memories surfaced. Smaller memories, ones I had ignored at the time. Moments when Vanessa answered questions directed at Michael. Moments when family plans were finalized before I heard about them. Moments when invitations arrived later and later each year. None of those incidents seemed important by themselves. Together, they formed a pattern, like puzzle pieces that only reveal the picture when enough of them are connected. I closed the album and sat quietly for a long time. Outside, a lawnmower hummed somewhere down the street. A delivery truck rolled past the house. Ordinary sounds, ordinary life. Yet my understanding of the past felt different. Maybe this distance had not appeared overnight. Maybe it had been growing for years while I convinced myself everything was fine. I remembered helping Michael buy his first home. I remembered writing a check large enough to cover expenses he could not afford at the time. I remembered babysitting Olivia countless weekends so he and Vanessa could focus on work. I never viewed those things as sacrifices. That is what family does, or at least that is what I believed. The more I reflected, the more one uncomfortable question emerged. If money had never entered the picture, would they still be treating me this way now? I did not like asking that question. It felt unfair. But fairness and truth are not always the same thing. Later that afternoon, Dorothy called. She asked how I was doing. I told her I had spent the day looking through old photographs. She laughed softly and said memories can be comforting. I agreed. Then I added that sometimes memories can also be revealing. There was a brief pause before she replied. People rarely change overnight, Eleanor. Sometimes we simply notice what has been there all along. After the call ended, I opened my notebook once more. This time I did not record another missed invitation or unanswered message. Instead, I wrote a single sentence across the top of a fresh page. Maybe they never loved the woman. Maybe they loved what the woman could provide. Then I closed the notebook and stared out the window, wondering how much more the test would uncover before it finally reached the truth. By the beginning of the next month, I had made a decision. I would stop looking for explanations and start collecting evidence. Not evidence for a courtroom, evidence for myself. I needed to understand who my family became when they believed I had nothing left to offer. That realization brought an unexpected sense of calm. I no longer waited beside the phone hoping it would ring. I no longer checked social media searching for invitations that never came. Instead, I observed. Quietly, patiently. The first person I contacted was Richard Hayes. Richard had been my attorney for nearly 20 years. He knew my finances better than anyone. We met in his office on a bright Thursday morning. The building overlooked the river that cut through downtown. Richard greeted me with his usual warm smile and offered coffee before we sat down. I explained everything. The story I had shared with Michael. The growing distance. The exclusions. The silence. Richard listened carefully without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "And what do you want to do now?" he asked. I looked out the window for a moment before answering. "Nothing," I said. "At least not yet." Richard nodded slowly. He understood. Some battles are won by waiting. Before leaving, I asked him to keep all discussions regarding my finances strictly Confidential. He assured me that nothing would be disclosed. My assets remained exactly where they had always been. Secure. Untouched. Invisible to everyone except the people legally authorized to know. That arrangement gave me peace of mind. A few days later, Michael finally called. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. He asked how I was doing. His tone sounded polite but distant, like someone speaking to a neighbor rather than his mother. During the call, he never once asked whether I needed help. He never asked how I planned to manage. He never offered to visit. When the conversation ended, I sat quietly in my living room and thought about that. Years ago, Michael would have driven across town if he thought I was struggling. Now he barely had time for a phone call. The difference was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Vanessa seemed increasingly comfortable treating me as an afterthought. I learned through relatives that she was organizing family events, vacations, and gatherings. My name rarely appeared in those plans. Occasionally someone would mention me, usually with polite concern. But concern from a distance costs very little. Real care requires effort. One afternoon, Dorothy stopped by again. We sat on the back patio drinking iced tea while a warm breeze moved through the trees. I told her I was continuing the experiment. Dorothy raised an eyebrow and smiled. "And what have you learned?" she asked. I thought carefully before answering. "People reveal themselves when they think there is nothing to gain," I said. Dorothy nodded. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. We simply listened to the birds and watched the afternoon sunlight move across the yard. Later that evening, I opened my notebook once more. The pages were filling quickly now. Missed invitations, short conversations, forgotten traditions, new patterns, old memories. Piece by piece, the picture was becoming clearer. And with every new entry, I became more certain that the truth waiting at the end of this journey would be far more revealing than anyone in my family expected. As summer moved closer, the behavior I had been quietly documenting became harder to dismiss as coincidence. The distance was no longer subtle. It was visible. One Saturday afternoon, I attended a community charity luncheon that I had supported for years. The event was held at a country club about 15 miles from my home. I arrived early, greeted familiar faces, and settled into my seat. About 20 minutes later, Vanessa walked into the room with two relatives. She saw me immediately. Our eyes met for a brief second. Then she looked away and continued walking as though she had not recognized me. I watched her laugh with other guests across the room. She never approached my table. She never said hello. She never acknowledged my presence. Years ago, that would have bothered me deeply. Now I simply observed. Later, one of the relatives stopped by to chat. During our conversation, she mentioned a family weekend trip being planned for the fall. Several cabins had already been reserved. Activities had already been scheduled. Everyone seemed excited. I listened quietly. Then she asked whether I had decided which cabin I wanted. The question caught her off guard as soon as she asked it. Her smile faded. She realized what I already knew. Nobody had discussed the trip with me. Nobody had asked if I wanted to come. She quickly changed the subject. I smiled and helped her escape the awkward moment. On the drive home, I thought about how often similar situations had started occurring. Information reached me accidentally. Invitations surfaced through strangers. Plans were made without my knowledge. The pattern never changed. A few days later, Michael called unexpectedly. For a moment, I wondered whether something had happened. His voice sounded rushed. After a few minutes of small talk, he asked whether I had considered downsizing my home. The question seemed innocent at first. Then he began discussing maintenance costs, property taxes, and practical concerns. I listened carefully. Not once did he ask what I wanted. Not once did he ask how I felt. The conversation sounded less like concern and more like an assessment. When the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the notebook beside me. Then I wrote another entry. Interest in circumstances. No interest. In person. The following weekend, Dorothy invited me to lunch. We spent nearly 2 hours talking at a small restaurant overlooking the lake. Halfway through the meal, she leaned forward and asked a question I had been avoiding. "Are you disappointed in them?" I looked out at the water before answering. "No," I said quietly. Disappointment implies surprise. Dorothy nodded slowly. She understood exactly what I meant. The hardest part was no longer accepting what was happening. The hardest part was realizing how comfortable everyone seemed with it. Their choices no longer appeared accidental. They appeared calculated. The more distance they created, the more freedom they felt to reveal themselves. And with every passing week, The test continued producing the same result. Not anger, not concern, not loyalty, something colder, something far more revealing. The test was working better than I ever imagined. About 2 weeks after my lunch with Dorothy, something unexpected happened. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished watering the flowers near the front porch when I noticed a familiar car pulling into my driveway. It was Olivia. She stepped out carrying a small paper bag and a drink tray from a local coffee shop. For a moment, I wondered if she needed something. That thought embarrassed me the second it entered my mind. The test had made me suspicious of everyone. Olivia walked up the path with the same warm smile she had worn since childhood. She handed me a coffee exactly the way I liked it and held up the paper bag. Inside were 2 blueberry muffins. "I thought we could have a snack together," she said. There was no request attached, no hidden agenda, no awkward conversation about money. We sat at the kitchen table for nearly 2 hours. Most of the conversation had nothing to do with family. She talked about college classes, professors, future plans, and a part-time job she had recently started. I listened and asked questions. Several times I caught myself smiling. It had been a long time since a visit felt that natural. At one point, Olivia glanced around the kitchen and laughed softly. "Everything still looks exactly the same," she said. I looked around too. The old clock, the curtains, the photographs. She was right. Some things had not changed. Before leaving, she helped me carry a few boxes into the garage. The task took less than 10 minutes. When we finished, I thanked her. She looked surprised. "Grandma, it was only a few boxes." To her, it was nothing. To me, it was everything. Because she had shown up. That evening, after she left, I opened my notebook. For the first time in months, I wrote something positive. Olivia visited. No requests. No expectations. Just kindness. The following weekend she returned. This time she brought homemade cookies from a recipe she had been trying to perfect. We sat on the back patio while the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. During our conversation, she mentioned hearing relatives discuss finances during a recent gathering. The comment immediately caught my attention. Olivia explained that some family members had been speculating about my situation. Some assumed I would eventually sell the house. Others wondered whether I would move into a smaller apartment. A few even discussed what might happen to family traditions now that I was supposedly struggling. Olivia shook her head while describing the conversation. "It felt strange," she admitted. "Nobody seemed concerned about how you were doing. They were mostly talking about what would change for them." Her words lingered in my mind long after she left. They confirmed something I had suspected for months. The conversation was never really about me. It was about what people believed they might gain or lose. Yet sitting there on the patio, I realized something equally important. Not everyone had failed the test. Olivia never asked about inheritances. She never asked about bank accounts. She never asked whether the stories about my finances were true. She cared about the person, not the circumstances. In a family increasingly driven by calculations, one heart still remembered love. The decision came quietly. There was no dramatic moment, no argument, no final insult that pushed me over the edge. The truth had already revealed itself over months of observation. All that remained was to bring everyone into the same room. I called Richard and asked him to arrange a family meeting. He agreed without asking many questions. A week later, invitations were sent. The message was simple. I wanted to discuss important personal matters and future planning. That wording worked exactly as expected. Suddenly people found time for me again. Michael called twice in the same week. Vanessa sent a polite text asking whether I needed anything. Relatives who had barely spoken to me in months suddenly seemed concerned about my well-being. I noticed every change. I wrote them all down. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in a private conference room at Richard's office. The room overlooked the river and contained a long polished table surrounded by comfortable chairs. I arrived early. Richard greeted me at the door. We reviewed everything one final time. Then we waited. One by one, family members arrived. Michael and Vanessa entered together. Several relatives followed. Their expressions ranged from concern to curiosity. Everyone appeared eager to learn why they had been invited. Only Olivia seemed relaxed. She sat beside me and asked whether I had eaten lunch. The question made me smile. Even now, her focus remained on the person rather than the situation. Once everyone settled into their seats, Richard opened the meeting. He thanked everyone for attending and explained that I wanted to address several personal matters. The room grew quiet. I looked around the table. Some faces appeared nervous. Others appeared hopeful. Then I began speaking. I thanked everyone for coming. I spoke calmly. Slowly, I explained how, months earlier, I had shared the story of financial hardship. I reminded them how quickly circumstances had changed afterward. Nobody interrupted. Nobody moved. The room became completely still. Then I revealed the truth. I explained that my finances had never collapsed. My investments remained intact. My savings remained secure. My assets had never disappeared. The silence that followed felt enormous. Michael blinked several times. Vanessa stared at me without speaking. Across the table, confusion spread from face to face. Richard calmly confirmed everything. Documentation had been prepared. Every statement could be verified. The story everyone believed had never been real. Then I did something even more important. I opened my notebook. Page after page contained dates, events, missed invitations, forgotten traditions, unanswered messages, and observations gathered throughout the months. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse anyone. I simply described what happened. Facts require no dramatics. As I spoke, several relatives lowered their eyes. Michael looked increasingly uncomfortable. Vanessa remained silent. For the first time since the experiment began, nobody seemed eager to speak. The room went silent when they realized the test had never been about money. It had always been about character. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The room remained frozen beneath the weight of the truth. I closed the notebook and rested my hands on the table. There was nothing left to prove. The evidence had already spoken for itself. Michael finally broke the silence. He started to explain. He talked about misunderstandings, busy schedules, and unfortunate timing. I listened politely. Then I nodded and thanked him for sharing his perspective. I did not argue. I did not challenge him. Months earlier, I might have wanted answers. Now I already had them. Vanessa remained unusually quiet. The confidence she often carried seemed absent. Several relatives avoided eye contact altogether. Others offered awkward apologies. I accepted every apology with grace. Holding resentment had never been my goal. Discovering the truth had been. Richard then opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. The room immediately grew tense again. Everyone understood what was coming next. I calmly explained that the events of the past months had forced me to reconsider certain decisions regarding my estate and future planning. Faces around the table became very still. I continued speaking. For years, I had assumed my legacy would naturally pass through the family in predictable ways. The test had shown me that assumptions are not always wise. Character matters. Loyalty matters. Kindness matters. Those qualities cannot be purchased, inherited, or demanded. They must be demonstrated. I explained that my updated plans reflected the lessons I had learned. No voices were raised. No dramatic reactions occurred. In many ways, the silence was more powerful than any argument could have been. Then I turned toward Olivia. Her eyes widened slightly. She had no idea what I was about to say. I told everyone that throughout the entire experience, one person had consistently shown up without expectations. One person had offered time instead of advice, kindness instead of calculations, and genuine care instead of curiosity about finances. Olivia looked down at the table, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. That humility only reinforced everything I believed about her. I explained that a significant portion of my future estate planning would now support Olivia's education, opportunities, and long-term future. The decision was not a reward. It was recognition. She had valued the relationship when she believed there was nothing to gain. That mattered to me more than any financial discussion ever could. After the meeting ended, people slowly gathered their belongings and left the conference room. Some offered quiet farewells. Others simply walked away. Michael lingered near the doorway. For a moment, I saw the young boy from the old photographs. The son I remembered. We shared a brief conversation. Not about money, not about documents, about family. The road ahead would not be simple, but honesty had finally entered the room. Sometimes that is where healing begins. Later that evening, I sat alone on my back patio watching the sunset settle across the yard. The same trees swayed in the breeze. The same birds crossed the sky. Yet everything felt different. Not because I had protected my assets. Not because I had changed legal documents. The peace came from clarity. Money did not change my family. It simply revealed who they already were. And once the truth revealed itself, I no longer had to wonder where I stood. For the first time in many months, I closed my notebook. There was nothing left to record,